8 hours though.
Hello. How is everyone? This is our first live broadcast with an interview. Now, I can't tell if there's any viewers on here yet. Broadcast. Uh-oh. With an interview. Okay, I have to turn that off. Okay. So this is a practice. You know, I've never done this before. Now, I don't see any viewers on here, so I'm going to share this again. Oh, no, there's 39 people on here. So say hello. I don't see anybody in the chat yet. I have Charles. Can you see him down in the corner there? Yay! So you are the first people to see a live stream with two master knitters where you can ask questions. Oh, now I'm seeing questions down when I'm looking at the other one, but I'm not seeing questions from up here. Now I'm going to experiment a little bit before we get Charles going on here. I'm going to see if I can control who is big or not. Can you see Charles? Uh-oh. I don't see Charles. Are you guys seeing Charles? Let me know. Oh, there he is. Yay! Charles, say hi. You're on now.
Hello, everybody. How is everybody? Happy knitting.
Okay, so.
How is everybody? Happy knitting.
I hope you don't hear this straight. Hold on just a second because I'm going to go get my ear pods. Hang on. I'll be right back. Because we do not want to have feedback here, okay? Hold on.
Nobody carries it. It must be an old pattern. Nobody carries it, and so I'm gonna have to order like Minnesota or somewhere to get it. I might just have to come up with a different kind of thread. I know, I'm visual too. All right then, thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for checking with us.
That's why you'll see me sitting.
Yes. I would think that
This is exactly why we're doing this. This is our setup. So I need to, there's a 3-second delay or so, and I want to be able to hear what Charles says. But if I have him live, then it reverberates. So I'm going to put him on my iPad and use my ear plugs. It'll just take me a second to set this up. Please be patient with me. And this is a learning experience. Okay.
Yeah, this is the one that was at, this was the one that was.
Well, almost ready. Right now I have it on silent because I didn't realize that it would reverberate.
Well, soft yarn's a lot easier for a first lace project because it's
Please bear with me. I know you will. Thank you. You all are so patient. I appreciate it so much.
But you might want to start with go all the way down to white and see if you can find a dark brown.
Okay, let's see now. Let me turn my volume up here. Whoa. Okay, Charles.
Okay. How's that?
Okay. Here we go. I'm all set, Charles.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Hello?
Funky to work with.
Are you on the webinar?
You hear me now?
You wash it, and man, it's
Is it working, Suzanne?
Oh dear.
I don't think it's working.
That's good.
Is there too long of a delay?
Yes, we can hear you now. That's good.
I think there's a long delay.
Me?
I can hear you, but there's a very long
Yes.
delay.
But
It is working. Let me text you. It is working. It's working. So Charles, no, what you there is a long delay. Yes, so we need to figure that out.
We thought we had this all worked out, didn't we, Suzanne?
Okay, Charles. Okay, Charles, what I would like you to do is to, yes, so can you, Charles, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, okay. I am going to read you some questions that people have submitted, and you can answer them, okay?
Right. Okay. Yes.
Okay. Susan Marie asked, Charles, given your unique knitting and design background, I would be interested in learning what was the most difficult thing for you when you went through the Master's Hand Knitting program.
That's kind of funny. Maybe you could answer that, Suzanne, because I remember the first time I met you. I met you at Stitches West, if you'll remember, and I had just gone through the first level of Masters, and I was pretty proud of myself because I kind of breezed through that, and I was bragging about how well I had done. And little did I know that you were reviewing my second level, which was basically about finishing. Do you remember that? And that was my biggest hurdle, was the finishing stuff. Let me tell you that my first level, I got back one page that was just a paragraph of stuff I had to redo. But I am now the one that Masters talks about sticking to the Masters program, because my second level review, the first reject letter I got was 15 pages, single spaced. And Suzanne was partially responsible for that, because I was so bad with my finishing that they sent it back to me with 15 pages of what I needed to do over again. That was my first reject letter. So I got mad. I was just going to stop the whole program. And then I finally sat down and thought, okay, I'm going to look at this again. And I redid it. I sent it off the second time. My second reject letter was only 9 pages, single spaced. So I had improved. And finally I sent it off. And the third time I got it back and I passed the second level. And then I went on to the third level, and Suzanne reviewed that one. And Suzanne, you can tell him I did better on my third level than I did the first level. So I would say the finishing was my hardest thing. And now, of course, I teach finishing, and I love to do finishing. So finishing was my hardest thing to do.
very much. That's just
So one of the things, when we met Charles, Binka and I were at Stitches West, and we were walking down the hall. And there were some classes in the rooms next to us down the hall, and there was a man in there teaching, and I had never met him before. And he looked over at Binka and I as we're walking by the door. His classroom door was open. He saw us. He goes, "Oh, there's my 2 reviewers right there." And we had both just seen his level 2, and it was not good. And he was just beaming with pride about doing so well. And we were jovial and very polite and everything, but after we walked by and we go, "Oh no, he's not going to be happy."
But I didn't know that you were my reviewers at that time, really.
But when he finished, I got to see his level 3, and it was some of the nicest work I've ever seen. Unbelievable work. No, so his work was so beautiful. Oh my goodness. And then he was invited to be on the review committee. So Charles served on the review committee for several years as well. Charles, tell people what you did with your level 2 box when you first got it back and when you were so disappointed.
Yeah, at that time I lived on a beautiful lake, and I came this close to taking my level 2 box and just going to a bridge and just tossing it over into the lake. Is that what you're talking about, Suzanne?
Yes, yes, yes. So Susan Marie also has another question. She said, what do you feel is the most valuable thing you learned from the Master Hand Knitting program?
The most valuable thing I learned I think the most valuable thing that I learned was the beauty of research and learning about really quality knitting, and taking my knitting from a homemade point of view to a handmade point of view, of understanding what true elegance of knitting is, and the architecture of knitting, and where to go to the experts to find the real way or the better way to do something. You know, there are probably 100 ways to do a particular way, but what's the best way to do it? I remember one time, Suzanne, being with you when we were reviewing a project, and this knitter had done an unusual way to cast on, and you and I spent 2 or 3 hours trying to figure out how that person had done a particular cast on, and we had more fun trying to investigate what the cast on that person had used and how they'd done it. And we pulled out all kinds of books, and we played and we knitted with it. Before that, you know, to me, a long tail cast on was how you cast on, and I never paid much attention to it. And to think that I would have spent 2 or 3 hours investigating how somebody had cast on their knitting was something that would have been way beyond me. So that's an example of what what I learned from it, is just that knitting can be taken to such a higher level than what I'd ever thought about before. I mean, that's one example. SSKs, for instance, I never paid much attention to an SSK, and I learned that mine didn't look like a knit two together, didn't mimic a knit two together. Is because I was stretching my stitches. Now, when I make an SSK, I knit on the tips of the stitches, and that's because research taught me that. So I could go on forever and ever about what it meant to me, but it elevated the quality of my knitting. And now I know where to go find the right person. I come to you.
Okay, Charles, here's another question. This is from Knitty Girl, which is Diana Danko. She says, Charles, who taught you to knit? How long have you been knitting? I know you love knitting socks. Is there anything else you love to knit? And before you answer that, let's start a little system since there's this delay. How about when you're done talking, put your finger up. And when I'm done talking, I'll put my finger up. How about that? Okay?
Okay.
Yes. Okay, here you go.
Okay. My mother taught me to knit when I was 4. I will soon be 70. So I have been knitting for 66 years. Can you believe that? You're supposed to say you don't look that old. And what was the next thing? Oh, what do I like to knit? I like to knit all kinds of things. I mean, I make sweaters. I make finger puppets. Have you got your finger puppet there, Suzanne? Finger puppets. I do toys. I do all kinds of things. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but anyway, yes.
Okay, the next question is, yes, I do have my finger puppet. So Charles, this is also from Diana Danko. She says, your Aran sweater in a past issue of Cast On really inspired me when I made my level 3 sweater. Just wanted you to know that. Isn't that nice?
Nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so here's another question from Margaret. She said, I'm debating buying ChiaoGoo's interchangeable sock needle set. They have 4-inch tips and 5-inch tips. I've never ever socked with bamboo DP ends. So if I get one trial circular needle, is it personal preference? I haven't had a chance to look at sock knit along information. I bought yarn for it today. Do you have a preference on the types of needles that you use for knitting socks?
Well, I use, I know that everybody has a different preference, either to use DPNs or to use 2 circular needles or to use a magic glue. I learned 60 years ago, I learned to work with DPNs, and that's still what I work with is DPNs. And I use a carbon-based DPN or a metal DPN because I work with size 2.5s or like a size 1 or size 0 US size. And if I don't use a metal needle, I break them. The tension with my needles is I break them. So I have to use a metal needle, DPN. Everybody does different, likes different needles. And what I would suggest to you that you do is perhaps the knit shop where you may be buying your needles, if you're not buying them online, perhaps the knit shop will let you try whether you want if you're doing the ChiaoGoo needles, they may let you try the different tips because it's a personal preference whether you want them. I don't like the little small tips on needles. I like a longer tip. So it's just a personal preference. But for me, I want a 6-inch DPN in a metal needle. The sharper the point, the better.
Okay, next question. This is from Demetria. What would you advise those of us that just started the Master Hand Knitting program? Is there any advice that you would give for someone who's just started?
Well, first of all, if you're just starting, I'd make sure that you've organized yourself well. I would try to find a buddy to work with, maybe make it so that you can collaborate with someone. I would certainly check the Ravelry forums. Those forums were very helpful for me when I was going through the program to see what other knitters that were going through the program were doing. One mistake I made was that I worked the swatches and then I put them aside, and then I went back and I finished all the swatches, and then I went back and answered the questions after the fact. I wish I had worked the swatches and then answered the questions for those swatches. But I think organizing, answering the questions per swatch, getting yourself labeled, organized, I think that's it. I hope that answers that question. Are people liking this, Suzanne? I mean, are they giving us some feedback that it's good or not?
Okay, so people are kind of wondering where I am. I'm here. For me, I can see me all the time on the screen. Charles, I'm in Bakersfield, California. And Charles is in Clayton, Georgia, at his local yarn store. It's called Silver Threads and Golden Needles, and that's the yarn store that you can see behind him. And I'm going to go back to Charles and finish asking questions with him. And post your questions over in the chat too once I finish with the Ravelry ones, and be sure to put the word question in capital letters. It's easier for me to find it. Okay, so back to Charles. Okay, Charles, here's another question. Charles and Suzanne, how do you organize your swatches and sample knits, e.g. practice buttonholes, increase, decreases, etc.? Since Suzanne has got us swatching everything, they are starting to mount up. Do you ever use old swatch of your favorite yarn, even if it has the same stitch pattern as the new project?
I don't. I always swatch for every project with the particular yarn I'm doing and particular needles. So I swatch every time for every project, and I keep that swatch with that project. And many times I'll swatch while I'm in the project. So because I may decide to change, just decrease or increase, and so I'll do different swatches within a project. But no, I never keep a swatch for another project because it's going to change from one project to the next. So I swatch, and I make big swatches. I don't make little 4-inch swatches. I make really big swatches. I like to block the swatches, and many times I'll keep the swatch on a separate needle so that I can try increases and decreases or whatever. But I buy an extra skein of yarn many times just so I can have that for a swatch thing. So I know you all hate swatching, but I love swatching. I think that's the best word in knitting, swatching.
Me too. I make really, really big swatches. I love to keep my swatches. I like to look at them later on. They all remind me of the project and the process that I was going through. And the reason one of the reasons you don't want to skip swatching, let's say you've used that yarn and that needle before, and you think you know that your gauge in that fabric, but years may have gone by or time may have gone by and your tension will have changed. Your mood will have changed. How much stress or how relaxed you are will change the tension in your knitting. Okay, Charles, here's another question for you. This is from Anne. She's from France. She's one of my translators for me. And she says, Charles, is there a difference in your state of mind when you're knitting a garment that will be worn versus one that will be shown, like in an exhibit or for a magazine? Also, can you tell us about other knitting designers that inspire you?
Bonjour, Anne. It's so nice to talk to people from all over the world. And the answer is definitely there's a difference in when I'm knitting for something that's going to be worn and when I'm knitting for an exhibit. When I'm knitting for an exhibit, I'm free to do any kinds of things. When I'm knitting for an exhibit and it doesn't have to be worn, it doesn't have to be washed, it doesn't have to be practical, I can put sticks in it, I can put glue in it, I can put wire in it, I can put anything in it that I want to. I can knit with things that don't have to necessarily, doesn't have to be worn. So yes, it frees me up to do whatever I want to do. That's certainly true. As far as designers that have inspired me, oh gosh, there's just tons of them. I'm inspired by a lot of people that are no longer with us. One knitter that is no longer with us that I happen to know was Mary Walker Phillips, who brought back macrame many years ago. She did wonderful things. She did knitted counterpanes, and she was a very inspirational knitter to me. There's a wonderful knitter from Sweden that I admire, Marie. Gosh, her name just slips me, but she wrote a book in English that's called Pop Knitting. I'm very inspired by her work. Gosh, you put me on the spot now, but there's just tons of people. So yes, it's I love creative knitting, and I love to be able to look at any material that is maybe not thought of as yarn, and certainly exhibit knitting allows me to use hose pipes if I want to, or to use ribbon, or to use something that wearing it and washing it and whatever would not allow me to do if it weren't going to be on exhibit. So that's a great question, Anne. Thank you.
Okay, Charles, another question. This is from Nana Anderson. She said, Charles, your work is fascinatingly beautiful. I love your use of color and shape. I see your knit designs are a full spectrum of things. Your embellished socks are fabulous, and your garment designs are lovely. I am a basket weaver as well as knitter and see the similarities in colors, design, even techniques sometimes. Do you work in other art mediums besides knit and crochet?
I have probably done everything in my lifetime. But most recently, I've been concentrating in knitting, but I've done a lot of needlepoint. I've painted, but predominantly it's been with knitting. I have a degree from the School of Architecture, so I studied design from that standpoint in a formal way. So I studied balance and rhythm and proportion and color theory and all those things in a technical way. But as far as applied arts, painting and knitting and needlepoint and the fiber arts have been pretty much it. I've done some basketry. I have a minor degree in weaving. So it's all basically been some form of fiber art that I've been involved with. But one kind of crosses over to the other, doesn't it? But it's one inspires the other. So who knows what I'm going to do tomorrow, though.
Okay, Charles, next question. This is from Sherry C. And she is asking, she says, "Hi, Charles. What have you been working on recently? Any new books, exhibits, or workshops that we can look forward to?"
Well, my next big workshop is I've been invited to come to Yarn Over, which is a big knitting show, a knitting conference in Minneapolis. Yarn Over has been going on for a number of years, and I think there are 10 or 15 knitting instructors. Yarn Over is in Minneapolis. It's at the end of April. So I'll be teaching there. I also teach every year at the John C. Campbell Folk School, which is a wonderful school. Suzanne's been there with me. John C. Campbell's in Brasstown, North Carolina. If you ever get a chance to come there, people come from all over the world. There are 22 classes every week. I'll be teaching there at the end of March. So come then. As far as what I'm working on, I have a new collection of things I'm working on called How Does Your Garden Grow? It's a three-dimensional interpretation of vegetables and flowers. I'm presenting things in a way that you've never thought about before. For instance, I have stalks of okra that will be presented on 6-foot-tall posts, an individual stalk of okra that looks exactly like a stalk of okra, and it's knitted with cotton and with mohair. And you know how okra has a little fuzzy feeling to it. So this okra is three-dimensional, and it's knitted. I have 12 heads of Brussels sprouts, and they will be mounted on a pedestal with these Brussels sprouts, and it looks like that they could be picked up and eaten off. Those are worked on size 00 needles with embroidery floss, and so they've got the various shades of the green coming up, and so that's How Does Your Garden Grow? I'm looking for a museum that will let me show those. Okay. And then Suzanne.
Are you guys enjoying this interview with Charles? Since this is the first time we're trying this, we need feedback on that. Now, he is not watching the chat down the side, because when you first do this, just paying attention to the conversation is hard enough. It took me a while to figure out how to read the chat down the side and talk at the same time. So I'm going to be starting to read the chat pretty soon and asking the questions you're posting over in the chat. I have one more question over from the Ravelry to ask him, and then I'll start asking him your questions. Now, some people have said there's some background noise from the shop. Is it too distracting? We need to know that. I need to learn how to do this better for future interviews. This is kind of our trial here. We need to learn, and you guys are going to help us, okay? So now I'm going to go back to Charles. I'm going to ask him some more questions. Okay, Charles. This is from Susie Maloney. She says, "Hi, Charles. Your work is so different. Where do you get your ideas? What inspires you? How do you start a pair of socks like Snake in the Grass or Out of Africa? And finally, are those real sticks in Walk in the Woods, and how did you get them in the sock?"
3 great questions. how do I get my inspiration? I really get my inspiration a lot of times from nature. You know, nature is never really makes a mistake. And if you're ever lost for inspiration, then look to nature. Look for nature for color. Look to nature for proportion. Look for nature for, nature is just a great inspiration. Snake in the grass, and I happen to have snake in the grass here. Snake in the grass came from my little advertisement here. Snake in the grass is in my book, The Embellished Sock. And if you haven't seen Snake in the Grass, it is a flip-flop sock. And it came from, I entered a competition a number of years ago where it was done by Knitters Magazine. And you wear it with your flip-flops, and you see it fits over the snake runs up the leg. Can you see it there? Here's the snake, and there's, the snake fits over your flip-flop. And anyway, it's kind of hard to see here, but you can find it in my book. And the snake in the grass, where it came was the manufacturer wanted a creative sock, and I just thought of snake in the grass. And then from that, the inspiration for the sock came from the name. And then from there, I thought, how can I make a snake in the grass? And so there it is. It's the snake runs around the leg of the grass, and then there's flowers in the grass. And as far as the sock with the twigs, those were real limbs in there, and they were woven in there, and then I wrapped them around there, and that was an exhibit piece. And this piece that Suzanne is holding up now was also in that same exhibit. Those socks were never intended to be worn, and that sock is permanently mounted. And so the ones with the twig, that was a walk in the woods. And so I knew that sock was never going to be worn, so I could put the twigs in there. The one that Suzanne is holding up now is called Step Aside William Morris, and it was inspired by a William Morris wallpaper that was brought to life three-dimensionally. So that was for a museum exhibit, and of course it's never intended to be worn. It could be worn, however, if I didn't have it permanently mounted on that stand. But the one with the twigs in it that I put, called A Walk in the Woods, and you can find that on my Pinterest board. It's called Beyond the Sock. The ones with the twigs in it would be kind of hard to wear that but this one that Suzanne has, you could conceivably wear that. I have one here it's also in my book, that you could wear, and it's called Tiptoe Through the Tulips. And you can wear this one. And again, the inspiration from this came through the name of, the old song of Tiptoe Through the Tulips. So I hope that helps to answer the question. A lot of times I get the inspiration for things just from the name of it.
Okay, so some people are asking if we could split the screen. That's one of the things that I'm trying to learn how to do. And right now, I don't know how to do it. What I'm using is Google Hangouts, and it allows me to switch back and forth between me and Charles. Now, I could have any number of people on here at the same time, and I can see everybody. I can see me and Charles, and he can see me and him. But you get to only see who I choose for you to see, and I can't choose both of us at the same time. So if anybody knows how I can make a live stream with a split screen where we can see both people at the same time, which is what I would really, really like to do, please let me know. Teach me. Please teach me how to do that. So now I'm going to go to the questions that people have been asking of Charles over in the chat. So I'm going to go back to Charles. You'll see him again, and then I'll ask you some of these questions, okay? So people are saying, Sherry Hayes says, he made the vest he has on, and yes, he did. Charles has made a lot of clothes.
My friend Sherry Hayes.
Valerie Dunham says, we are so happy you two are doing this that we do not mind the foibles of technology. Thank you. I appreciate that so much. And So then Valerie Dunham says, Suzanne can see Charles see the chat. Melanie Hensley says, question, what are the advantages of becoming a master knitter? That's an excellent question, Charles.
The advantages of becoming a master knitter. I think, first of all, it gave me some confidence. I hope confidence without arrogance. When I tell somebody about how to make something or how to do something, I can do it with confidence because I have been there and done that, and I have researched it, and I can say to them, there are 10 ways to do this cast on, and I've done all 10 ways, and this is the best way that I think you should do it from my experience. So I think that it's just the fact that I can, with some sense of authority, say to you, I know what I'm talking about. It also lets me know what I don't know, and it allows me to do that with a sense of confidence and to say that it's okay for me to not know something, but I know where to go find the answer. So I think that's the main thing. It gives you a sense of authority with some education behind it, that you can say what you can believe in what you're saying because you know from whence it comes.
Another question, Charles. This is from Raina Rakab. She says, does finishing mean sewing the pieces together after knitting?
Yes. Finishing is a common term we use when you are pulling things together, seaming, various ways of attaching pieces together. And there are a number of different techniques of seaming, and there are different ways you put different seams together between the sides of a garment, the top of a garment, or just how you attach various pieces together. And there are good ways of doing that, and there are better ways of doing that. And that's where I had real problems. My pieces were not put together properly before I did the master's program, and now my work is beautifully finished. And it makes the difference in a garment being handmade and homemade.
Also, finishing is kind of a confusing word because a lot of times you think that it means something you do at the very end, but for a lot of things, you have to think about the finishing before you even begin. For example, what kind of edge do you want to pick up your stitches from? How do you want the fabric to flow across a seam? Do you want it to stay in pattern? Do you want the seam to be invisible? If you do, you need to plan for that before you start your very first stitch. So I really think it should be called starting or beginning rather than finishing, because you can't wait until you're finished knitting to think about the finishing. Okay, another question for you, Charles. This is from Melanie Hensley. She says, question, how expensive is it to become a master knitter?
Well, I think it's been several years since I've been on the committee, but it's not terribly expensive. It's around $100 or $125, maybe $150 per level. You can go to the TKGA website and find that out, but it's not that expensive. There are 3 levels, but again, the website will give you the most current information on that. All of the people that review your projects are volunteers. That money really goes for the shipping back and forth of the projects, but it's about that much for the thing. And then, of course, you have to have the yarn and so forth, but it's not a terribly expensive thing in the big picture of what it's about. But don't quote me on any of those prices. Go to the TKGA website, and that will give you all the specific information that's currently up to date.
And also, all of the people that review your work who are on the Master Hand Knitting Committee, they are volunteers. So none of the cost of the program goes towards paying them. When Charles and I were both on the review committee, we did this out of the goodness of our heart. But it's a huge educational experience for us too, by reviewing others' work. And as Charles says, spending hours trying to figure out how somebody did something and reverse engineer it is a huge learning experience. That's where I got so much experience about looking at knitting. And I have trained my eyes to be able to recognize issues. I can see issues across the street. And it's like once you see them, you can't unsee them. So let me see here. There may be, seems like people are saying there's a delay between when Charles finishes and I start. And that's probably because I'm trying to look through the questions to see what to ask him next. So I'm not paying attention. And when he gives me the thumbs up to go next, I don't see it. So it's just a learning experience for me. And I will get better at it. I promise you. I want these to be refined. I want to be the first person to do this live, these interviews, and I want them to become professional. So any help you can give me, I appreciate. Okay. Here's another question for you, Charles. This is from Rana Rakab again. She says, can someone who lives in Europe enroll in the Master Knitting program?
Absolutely. We have had a number of people from all over the world. We have people from the Netherlands, from Thailand, literally from all of New Zealand. I spent 8 weeks in New Zealand a year or so ago, and there are a number of people in New Zealand who are involved in the program. It's absolutely. I know there are several master knitters from the Netherlands, so it's not a problem. You just have to make sure that the yarn weights are equivalent. And yes, absolutely. I remember particularly one fabulous knitter from the Netherlands who I was able to put her pin on her at one of our conferences. So absolutely, we hope you'll join us.
Okay, so the next question is from Rana again. She wants to know, how advanced in knitting do I need to be to start the program?
How advanced do you need to be? I think you need to have a pretty good understanding of what knitting is all about. And one good way to know whether or not you're ready for the master program, Arinda Holliday, who chairs the TKGA program, offers a course that's a correspondence course called Basics, Basics, Basics. And that's a very good program to do. If you start that program with her, then you'll know where you stand. Obviously, the program is not for someone who has just learned to knit, but it's also not for someone who, you don't have to be knitting for 30 years to do it either. But, I would suggest that if you're a little bit uncomfortable about it, that you take Arinda's Basics, Basics, Basics correspondence course, and then you will understand a little bit more about what the program is. But again, I would suggest that you go to the TKGA website, and some of those questions can be answered for you.
Okay, Charles. Arinda says, hello, Charles and Suzanne. And then there's Jane Hart says, tells Charles we really like this interview. Betty White says, Clayton, my sister lives in Lawrenceville. Let me see how far away that is. And everyone is saying they're enjoying this interview so much. Can you tell us a little bit about where you are, the town you're in, and the shop?
Okay, where I live is Clayton, Georgia. Where I am broadcasting from is actually in Franklin, North Carolina, which is about 30 or 40 minutes from where I live. I come to this shop, Silver Threads and Golden Needles. I work, volunteer. They don't pay me anything. I come for the fun of it every Tuesday, even though this is Wednesday. I come here every Tuesday and I hang out all day long, and we have a wonderful bunch of knitters here. It's a fabulous shop. It's owned by 3 wonderful people, and they've allowed me to come here because my internet connection is not really great where I live in Clayton. I actually, a year ago, moved full-time into an Airstream trailer. I have 3.5 acres of wonderful mountain. I live on the tail end of the Appalachian Mountains, the Smoky Mountains, and I have a 3.5 acre piece of land with a beautiful creek that runs through it. And I'm getting ready to start a big screen porch pavilion that will be my knitting studio. But right now I live full-time in an Airstream trailer, and the internet's not so good. So I asked Amy and Virginia if I could come and hang out here today so that we'd have better internet connection. And on Tuesdays, I teach a class called Tuesdays with Charles. And this month we're working on my Hallgrim hat. If you're not familiar with that, you can go on Ravelry and see that. It was a hat I designed several years ago, inspired by a church in Reykjavik, Iceland that I was visiting with. So we have a great time here. So I drive about 30, 45 minutes every Tuesday to come here to Silver Threads and Golden Needles. Suzanne's been here. She knows it's a wonderful shop. Virginia is an indie dyer, and so she dyes yarns, and we just have a great shop here, don't we, Suzanne?
Okay, Charles, next question. This is from Sue M, and she's a spinner. She says, question, do you recommend taking a finishing class before level 2?
Well, I certainly think, yes, I do. I think if you haven't done much finishing, it would help you, because a lot of emphasis in level 2 is on finishing, and it would save you a lot of heartache that I had if you don't know how to do nice finishing. So it wouldn't be a bad idea. And if you can take a Renda Holiday's finishing class, that's
Okay, let's see. Some people hear the background noise and some people don't, but it seems like we're doing a pretty good job. I think people are really enjoying it. Melanie Hensley has a question for you, Charles. She says, what is your Ravelry name?
My Ravelry name is Charles Gandy Knits. Easy enough. Come friend me there.
Oh, here's another question from Jane Hart. She says, Charles, do you teach any knitting classes?
Well, I do teach knitting classes all over the world. I teach every year. I teach a class at the John C. Campbell Folk School, and then I do various classes all over the country. I was just with Suzanne and her knitting guild in Bakersfield back in September. I'll be in Minnesota. I'm just all over the world. So yes, come invite me to come to your guild. I'm not cheap, but I'm good.
Okay, so if you have any more questions for Charles, I've gone through them all now, but be sure to post them. I'll give you a few more seconds. And I think that we're having a really good time here. It's so much fun to see Charles, and I'm so excited that this is going well. I'll give you a few more seconds, then we'll let Charles go, and we'll continue talking about our regular stuff, okay? Here we go. Let me check some more questions. Okay, Seth, this is from, let's see, Arinda Holiday says, you are so sweet. The TKGA website is tkga.org.
Oh.
Now, Anne Tremolier says, Charles and Suzanne, I dream of you coming to France to teach us. Wouldn't that be fun, Charles?
We're ready. Bring it on. We're ready to come.
And then Valerie Dunham says, I have a feeling you're about to have a bunch of new Ravelry friends, Charles. Okay. And Raina says, I wish to see you both in Switzerland one day. Wouldn't that be fun? Okay.
I used to live in Switzerland. Tell her that. I used to live in Lucerne. For 3 years, I lived in Lucerne.
And Kathy Westridge says, I didn't see the vest you're wearing on your Ravelry patterns page. Will you consider posting it?
No, this is a new design. And
somebody says, can you show us your vest?
Yes, let me see if I can show it to you. It's a, let's see how we can do this. Can you see that? This comes from
this is
Simple Vest, and the pattern is from.
Okay, that's beautiful.
This comes from the new
Japanese. It's gorgeous. I love the design.
Thank you. It will not be on Ravelry. No, I'm not writing this one up.
Okay, Charles. Does Charles have any advice on yarn for the master knitting program?
Keep it simple. Keep it neutral. 100% wool. Yeah, just the simple, no heather, just a neutral, 100% wool, worsted wool.
And now another question from Deborah Cisneros. Charles, how old were you when you started the master course, and how long did it take to finish?
How old was I? I I was in my 60s and I did it in a year, but I knit all day long every day. So don't count me. I mean, that's not fair for me to say that, but I did it pretty quickly, but I worked a lot. It was a lot of work.
Okay, one more question. This is from Dolise. She would like you to say your Ravelry name one more time, please.
Can I spell it here? It's Charles Gandy Knits. See if this posts there. Did that work? Did that put it up there on the web? Did it post on the chat
Okay.
site?
So Charles, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been so much fun.
Well,
I think that we'll probably do it again.
Well, let's do it again when we work the delay out. I hope that wasn't too much of a problem.
It's fun to be together like this.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to hang up. Bye-bye. See you
Bye.
next time. Love you. Okay. So I want to go on and answer. I'm going to take my earplugs out now. I don't need those anymore. Can you hear me okay? Let me get my chat going back on here. I closed it off. It was kind of distracting. Okay. So I want to tell you a little bit. Some people were asking how long it takes to go through the Master Hand Knitting program. It is a self-paced program. When I went through it, I was working full-time as a physician's assistant, and I worked 12-hour shift. I worked 3 or 4 12-hour shifts a week, but knitting was my way of relaxing and centering myself. So I started it. I started level 1 in November of 2008. And I sent it in about March of 2009. I had a couple things to resubmit. So I finished it, that's November, December, January, February, March, 5-6 months to do level 1. Some people, it takes them a year to do level 1. It's okay. It's a self-paced program. Then I started level 2 right away. And it took me about another 9 months to do level 2 and get it completed with the resubmits and everything. And I started level 3 immediately after that and finished it within a year. But I worked at it exclusively. I did not knit anything else during all of that time. I stayed true to my course. And what I wanted the whole time I was in the program, my biggest dream, I'm getting myself back on my other computer so I can see what's happening here because I can't see the chat. Okay, my biggest dream from about the middle of level 2 was I really, really, really wanted to be on the Master Hand Knitting Committee, but I didn't dare say so because if I said so, I knew that that would jinx me. So I just kept it to myself. I never ever talked about it. And then when I was doing level 3, I had everything pretty much finished. I was trying to finish up the pattern writing for my sweater. I had it all knit and everything. And Renda sent me a message on, and I was not friends with Renda. She was the director of the program. I got a message from her on Ravelry, which I was thrilled to get a message from Renda. She was my idol. And she said, when are you going to be done with level 3? And I think, well, I'm working on it as fast as I can. And then I sent it in for review. And it was one of those years, I think I sent it in like in November or something. It was one of those years where back east, there had snow everywhere, kind of like this year. And everything got snowed in. And hold on here. My box got stuck because of the snow. And so it had to go to 4 different people to be reviewed for level 3. So it was really slow getting to the final reviewer. And then one day I got an email from Carolyn Vance, and it turns out she was my co-chair. I didn't know. You don't know in advance who your co-chair is, not until you get your letter. But she sent me an email, And she said it seemed that I may have duplicated one of the patterns for the swatches, that I had the correct swatches, but I had duplicated the pattern. So when I was putting my pages in, I put the wrong page in, and I already had that written up. I just didn't put it in there. She said, could I email that to her? So I sent it to her. And then a few days later, I got my box back and I had passed level 3. And then Arenda called me. And that was like the most exciting call I've ever gotten in my life. And she said, would I like to be on the Master Hand Knitting Review Committee? That was like huge, huge, huge. And I was thrilled to death. It was so exciting. And so that's kind of, you know, the path I've been on all this time. And I keep learning, learning, learning. And now I have to learn how to do a split screen live interview. Who would have known that knitting would lead to that? Okay. So let me look down here at the questions. See, I have you on my iPad here too, because up here, I'm using Google Hangouts on my computer and I can't see any chat on that. So I have to go down here to look at the replay. This is Melanie Hensley. She says, do you have to belong to a guild to do the master program? No, the master program is a totally independent thing. But you do need to belong to the TKGA, the Knitting Guild Association. You need to pay your dues and to order the Master Hand Knitting program. And then once you complete it, when you send it in, you need to be an active member. So let's say, you know, you do your dues and then it takes you longer than a year. You would have to renew your dues to send in your box because you have to be an active member. Okay. This is Anna Molita, and I don't know if she was asking this of Charles or of me, but we'll both give you the same answer. What are your thoughts on swatching in the round using magic loop rather than the DPN method? I never see other knitters mention swatching with magic loop. I swatch with two 24-inch circulars. So it's however you want to knit. I don't know that if you're going to be knitting in the round like a sweater and the circumference is going to be like 40 inches, I don't know that DPNs are what you want to do for your swatch. But again, like Charles says, you need to make a good size swatch. So I see a lot of people make swatches as small as they can, because they don't want to invest time or yarn in their swatch. And that's a big mistake because, as they say, you can either knit a sweater or you can knit a big swatch. Because that sweater, if it doesn't fit, it's going to be a big swatch. So it's better to start out by knitting a big swatch. And I've shown you some of my swatches before. I don't have them out here right now, but my swatches are always like, you know, they're pretty good size. You need to be able to see the characteristics of the fabric in your swatch before you can determine that that's what you want to use for your garment. So let me see another question. Susan Day, I had no resubmits on level 3. It was a miracle. It was a miracle. I was so unbelievably thrilled. And I got it back right around my birthday. And I had just posted in the TKGA group. I was the administrator of the TKGA Ravelry group for about 6 years. And then when I retired from the committee, I turned that job over to Leslie. Leslie is now the administrator of the TKGA group, but I did that for a long, long time. And so when I was and it was when I was doing the Master Hand Knitting program and beyond, when I was expecting my birthday, I said my favorite cake, my birthday cake was German chocolate cake. So when Carolyn Vance, who was my level 3 reviewer, when she sent my box back to me, and it was right around my birthday, she put a picture of a slice of German chocolate cake in there. It was so cool. I still have it. So any other questions? So Dolise says, I can see the definite advantage to using two 24-inch circs for Intarsia socks. Actually, Intarsia socks are knit flat, and you seam them. Hold on, I'll show you my swatch. I'll show you my Intarsia swatch for my sock. keep my swatches in these boxes. I have lots of these boxes. Here is my swatch for my intarsia sock. And it's knit flat. It's all knit flat. And then you seam it, and then the toe is knit in the round. That's the only part that's knit in the round. So you could actually use straight needles over that if you wanted to. Okay. So if I do stranded socks, though, I use two 24-inch needles. And the reason that I like the two 24-inch needles, and I prefer the Hiya Hiyas over the Chagu. The Chagus have the cables. Here's a Chagu cable. They're pretty stiff. They don't bend around the corner very easily. Here's a Hiya Hiya needle cable. See, it bends. See the difference? You can't do that with the Chagu cables. They just won't do that. See? And so this is two 24-inch needles, and I'm doing this swatch. When I bring my needle around the corner to start the new needle, I bring the old one around and I stretch the stitches out on it. And you can't do that with magic loop. Now, one of the ladies in our Ravelry group showed how you do that with DPNs, and that was very cool. So she pulls the DPN out to the side and uses the new TPN. The idea is, this is where the needles changes right here. The idea is to have the stitches in a straight line as you go from one needle to the other, and that prevents that tight kink at the corner. That's why I like two 24-inch needles. I'll use magic loop, or I'll use DPNs, whatever I have on hand. But if I'm going to do stranded socks, I like two 24-inch needles. Okay, so that's that. Anne says, it seems that your knitting world and the world of the TKGA knitting world are full of kindness and professionalism. Yes, we are. And we are all about furthering the knowledge of knitting, traditional knitting. And it's like, in my idea, let's say you want to be a painter, or you want to be a pianist, or you want to play the violin, or any art, and knitting is an art. You learn the basics first. And so when I learned how to play the piano, I had to do my scales, and all that. And that's kind of learning how to do knit two together, SSK, increases, decreases. You're learning your scales, exercising your fingers. And then you start learning different composers. And usually good piano teachers will teach you the classic composers first. So you'll start learning Mozart and Bach and Beethoven and all of that stuff. And knitting's the same way. You need to learn the traditional. You need to learn about Aran knitting. You need to learn about stranded knitting. You need to learn about intarsia and color work and different ways of standard traditional knitting. Then once you learn the traditions, you can go off and do all kinds of crazy things like Stephen West or anyone else. Now, Stephen West is an excellent knitting technician, excellent. And that's why he can do all those crazy things he does, because he knows he has a firm foundation of the basics and the architecture and engineering of knitting. Then his mind can go off onto these wild tangents, and he can create these beautiful things. If he did not have those firm foundations, his things would not turn out as they do. So by learning, and when you first start learning knitting, it seems like there's this endless amount of information, and believe me, there is. Even as much as I know, there's still an endless amount still to learn, and I am on a quest every day. I learn. I'm constantly learning about knitting. But the more I know, the more it allows me to be confident, as Charles says, about what I'm doing, and knowing the results of what I'm going to do is how I'm going to create it and how the results will turn out. So I can just shoot things off the top of my head, and most of the time they turn out just fine. So let me go back to the questions. How long have we been on here now? What time is it? Almost an hour. Okay. Okay, I noticed on the toes, this is Valerie Dunham. I noticed on the toes of the Starry Starry Nights, the different toes start with different stitch counts, and the tops and the bottoms of the socks have different stitches amounts. Do we reconcile the difference? How do we? I'm not sure what you're asking, Valerie. In lesson 4, I gave you all those extra toe shapes. Those are all for the top of the foot, and they start with 39 stitches. If you have more stitches than that, all you have to do is backtrack a little bit, and you can see you can follow the same pattern that is set for doing the decreases. Margaret says she just got the Chagu sock set. The lace cable is so bendy. I love the Chagu sock set. Yes, these cables are their regular cables. They're too stiff. But the sock set has these little fine red cables, and I love them. Thank you for bringing that up, because I don't want to badmouth Chagu. They came out with the sock set because of that cable problem. Okay. Did Addi needles compare fairly with Hiya Hiyas? Hiya Hiyas, in my opinion, are far superior to Addi's and half the price. In fact, I got rid of all my Addi's. I used to have all Addi's. And when I found Hiya Hiya, I love their cables so much better. And I've had my Hiya Hiyas long enough now, I haven't gotten any stiff cables from them. All of my Addi's cables got stiff. And when you pay that much money for needles, I don't expect the cables to get stiff in just a couple of years, you know, because once the cables are stiff, they're no good to me. I like the tips of the Hiya Hiyas better. The Hiya Hiya sharps are even finer tip than the Addi lace. And the only way you can get the Addi lace is with those brass tips, and they tarnish, and it slows down your knitting. Have you ever noticed that when you go to knit those and they're tarnished, it creates friction, and you can't get your knitting going until the tarnish wears off, and guess what? It wears off on your knitting. Now, I know they have those Addi rockets, and I haven't tried those because I kind of gave up on Addi. I go straight with Hiya Hiya, Chagu. I also like Daya Craft needles. I don't have any in here, but they're like the Rolls Royce of knitting needles. I absolutely love them. But I don't use them for socks. I use them for my sweaters. Okay, let's see. I think I'm going to call it quits for today. I am going to show you one thing, because February 15th is coming up real soon, and we're going to start that new knit along, the iTag yoke. On February 15th, it will go up for sale half price. It's going to be $25, just like the iTag cardigan. The iTag yoke will be $12.50 on February 15th for 24 hours. After that, it'll be $25. The pattern will not be ready yet. You'll be buying the pre-pattern. But if you buy that between February 15th and March 1st, when the actual knit along starts, I'm going to be sending out preparation materials, things that you can start thinking about and working on and swatching and design ideas and stuff like that for the people who buy it early. The people who buy it after February 15th will still get all those materials. It's, you know, they'll still get it, but they won't get it 2 weeks before the knit along starts. So spread the word, share it with your friends. I would like to have a lot of people involved in this, just like we did the last time. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And Charles and I were talking actually before we went live today. One of the things that I'm going to teach you, you know, a yoke that goes around here out to this point, the tip of your shoulders, it's actually a circle, like a pie shawl. So a pie shawl and a yoke have a lot in common. And that's some of the information that I'm going to be sending out in advance before the knit along actually starts, and show you how the calculations work for a pie shawl and how you can use those same calculations for your yoke in planning where you want to put your design elements and what kind of design elements you want to use. So I'm very, very excited about that. I think I have my final color choices. This is Malabrigo sock. And this color is Cereza. And this is Araucania Huasco. and I don't remember the color. It's been in my stash for a long time, but this will be the body of my sweater. This is going to be the stranded knitting. And mine is going to be a cardigan. So I'm going to be steeking down the front. You don't have to steek, and you can do a pullover if you want. Yeah, remember, it's totally flexible. You can do whatever you want. So that's the end of my commercial. I'll be here again. This is Wednesday. I'll be here again on Sunday at 2 o'clock Pacific time. And I will be having another live interview with Arinda. Arinda Holiday is going to be my next interviewee. I haven't set a date with her yet. I would like to learn how to do split screen. And I know somebody mentioned it. They said they went to Google and they said it can make a split screen. If you can send me a link to that or something, maybe after this closes and it's in my videos on Ravelry, on YouTube, you could go in there and leave a comment. You know, all the live chat doesn't make comments, but underneath the video, if you go under the video and maybe give me a link to where you found the information, that would help me a lot. Anyway, I think this was a success. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you come back for more. Join my Facebook group, Knitting with Suzanne Bryan. Join my Ravelry group, Knitting with Suzanne Bryan. Give me thumbs up here. Let's see. I've gotten 62 thumbs up already. Give me some more thumbs up. Don't forget about that. No thumbs down. And share this with your social media. This will stay live. It's not going anywhere. It won't be live, but you'll be able to review it as a finished video. So take care. Happy knitting. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.